Welcome back to Velshi and Rule. In the biggest single-day sweep in history, Immigrations and Custom Enforcement arrested 680 workers yesterday across Mississippi, most of them Latino. The raids hit 7 food processing plants across 6 cities on the same day that many of the workers' children headed back to school. ICE released this new video today from a raid in Canton, Mississippi. Today, ICE spokesman Brian Cox says more than 300 of the arrested workers have been released from custody. He says, quote, they were placed into proceedings before the federal immigration courts and will have their day in court at a later date.
Joining us noon, that reporter we mentioned with the Jackson Free Press, Ashton Pittman, NBC News reporter Julia Ainsley, who covers immigration, and school superintendent in Scott County, Mississippi, Tony McGee. He says at least 6 families within his district had a parent caught up in the raids.
Tony, we've seen video of sobbing children in schools, businesses, on sidewalks, separated from their parents. Talk to me about these kids who were in your care, in your custody, when their parents were, in some cases, apprehended. What happened to them? Are they still in school? Where do you send them after school?
Well, thank you for having us and giving us a chance to talk about our boys and girls here in Scott County. Our kids were very upset yesterday, as you might think. It was a very emotional day for not only our kids, but our teachers and our administrators. We did have probably about 15 families that we know were directly affected by the raids, parents that were not at home when children left school that day. We were very blessed to have a lot of community members that reached out, a lot of organizations that were deeply ingrained within the Latino and Hispanic community in Scott County, which helped us make sure that those boys and girls had a safe place to go after school. Our job is to care for kids, to make sure that boys and girls are safe each and every day. You know, it's tough. I mean, you're a 5 or 6-year-old child. You're in the second day of school, and you're not speaking the English language, so it's already a little unnerving to go and feel good about school, but then to get word that mom and dad is not going to be there when you get home that afternoon, or not be able to pick you up, it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart as a father, myself, and as our teachers, our mothers and fathers too, and just been a very trying and emotional day yesterday and today for us too.
Ashton, we understand that many of these people are potentially in the country illegally, but help us understand the community there. The president often talks about these migrants and the invasion as criminals, as rapists, as drug smugglers. Based on the news that's been reported thus far, these people all appear to be employees in food processing plants.
Right. These are workers. These are not criminals as far as we know. These are people who are going and they're working to provide for their families while their children are at school or at daycare. And you know, just from talking to people, just from living in Mississippi, I know that what University of Mississippi law professor told me yesterday is absolutely true. You know, he told me that Cliff Johnson told me that, you know, in Mississippi, there might be people who say, you know, build the wall, but then they go back to their communities and their kids have a soccer coach who's an immigrant that might be undocumented, and they have neighbors and they know people in their community, and they might be saying build the wall, but they're not necessarily saying, you know, come round up my neighbors. So this is shocking to a lot of people, and videos and pictures of children crying at school on their first day of school, you know, and finding out their parents aren't going to be there to pick them up. This is shocking people. This is not, it's one thing to talk about immigration in a national context, you know, about building a wall, but it's another to see children in your own community crying because they don't know where their parents are.
Ashton, an argument that we often hear is that migrants are stealing jobs from the American worker. So now you've got 680 people not at work today. What's happening at these plants? Are Americans now showing up to fill these jobs? Are the smokestacks brimming? And are the food processors going to get their orders out with different workers that aren't migrants?
Right, you know, that's something I'm wondering, but I haven't heard of any kind of stampede of people looking for jobs at these plants now that they've lost so many workers. And I don't think you're going to hear about that because it's not really about, you know, I don't think these people are taking anyone's jobs. And I never hear people in Mississippi talk about, oh, the immigrants, they're here taking my jobs. People just don't talk about that here because we have one of the lowest immigrant populations in the country. We don't have a large undocumented population, yet here in 2019 and in 2008, ICE performed each time the biggest raid on immigrants at work sites in U.S. history here in Mississippi. And it's kind of difficult for me to understand why.
Julia, let's go to those work sites, those food processing plants. Has anyone there been charged?
We have no verification that they have or will be, Stephanie. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Mississippi yesterday said this should send a clear message to employers that if you hire illegal workers, we will come after you. And then right after that, the logical follow-up question was, well, what about these employers of these 6 food processing plants? And they declined to say whether they will be charged at all. One thing to remember here is a lot of times employers, and I'm not saying this happened in this case, but in past cases, an employer can cooperate with ICE in order to bring about a large-scale raid like this, and in return, they could get some kind of immunity, or certain people may be punished, or it might be a fine, but not a criminal penalty. So, there are a lot of questions here about who is at fault, but I think that these employers could actually talk and bring a lot to this conversation about why they felt the need to hire undocumented workers. And maybe they could say that they're having a hard time finding U.S. citizens to fill this job. Another thing that makes these raids easier for ICE than, say, the grand scale raids that we heard were going to happen last month that never came to fruition is that you have to work with local law enforcement. In a lot of those large cities, local law enforcement was refusing to cooperate with ICE. They said they would only step in an issue of public safety. And in this case in Mississippi, it seems that they did have the cooperation of local law enforcement. But that doesn't mean that because it's easy, it makes it easier on immigrants. Actually, workplace raids are the ways historically we've been able to round up the largest number of immigrants, but they usually focus on non-criminals and they focus on people with families, which is a reason why workplace raids were put on hold during the Obama administration.
So, Tony, were there ICE agents at the schools, and did the schools get a heads up about what was going to happen?
No, so we didn't have any ICE agents come to the schools, and we didn't get a heads up on that. We found out pretty much like everybody else after the situation that happened. Actually passed one of the processing plants that morning coming to work and saw some of it taking place there. And of course, once we got to school, found out a little more had happened, and kind of what the gravity of the situation. But did talk with some of the agents after that through phone conversation just to verify and make sure that we could verify that the parents were not going to be at home that afternoon, so we could find places for children to go. We didn't want kids to go home without anybody, and we talked with our bus drivers about making sure that we had some kind of visual reference if a parent or guardian was there. If a child felt unsafe or felt uneasy about getting off the bus, to bring them back to school. And we would make sure that they found a safe place to go that night.
Tony, did you ever believe when you went into education, when you became the superintendent of that school, that this would be something you're dealing with?
No, I told my staff the other day, this is kind of stuff they don't prepare you for in school. It's not in a textbook. There's no preparation for this, and honestly, the only preparation is the heart of an educator. You never want to see children torn away from families or families broken. We're just thankful and blessed, and we've got a strong community, a strong group of loving teachers that surround our boys and girls each and every day. And did I ever think I'd see it? No. I hope, be honest with you, I hope I might see it again.
Tony, thank you. Tony McGee is the superintendent in Scott County. Ashton Pittman is a Jackson Free Press reporter. Julia Ainsley is our NBC correspondent. Thanks to all three of you.
Thank you.
I ask you, Allie, isn't it amazing that these employers, these plant operators, can work with ICE? We're talking about 680 employees.
Yep.
It's not like one-off or a random.
Correct.
They know where to go
Yep.
to work. A program, a system is in place
Yep.
to hire undocumented immigrants, but it's those employers who can now turn on them
Yep.
and contact and work with the
It
government.
is a remarkably vulnerable position to be in, to be a law-abiding, working undocumented immigrant in America. And those are the ones we're actually targeting. That was not what President Trump said. When he started with, he talked about bad hombres, he talked about rapists, he talked about murderers, he talked about felons. Just recently in his speech, he was ticking off their murderers. And
the counter argument will be they came here illegally.
That's true.
That's true.
That's true. But this administration said that was not. John Kelly said this when he was Homeland Security Secretary. He said those people are not going to be priorities for deportation. It's going to be people who have committed crimes and committed felonies. So it's just a misrepresentation of what they were going to say. It's equally illegal, but, you know.
Food processing jobs are not in high demand. Not a lot of people desire those jobs, but they certainly need to get done.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.